Well, welcome to another session. I hope you were well. Uh, as you can see, this is a slightly different uh, video session, very much different from what I normally provide. Different location, different setup, different background. However, I thought it would be useful to share some thoughts and some ideas nonetheless. I would like to build on what I covered in the session which I called my introduction section to a new series and a new topic which I called or titled Masculinity, Manhood and Meaning. And in the first session I postulated that whether you are male or female, although I am speaking to men in this series, but whether you are male or female, we have a private life and we have a public life. The way we behave in our private capacity, in our personal lives, should be a mirror spitting image of our public perception and our public life and public image. In other words, there should not be a difference between who you are privately to who you are publicly. And this is despite the conventional wisdom that says that what you do in your private capacity is different and has nothing to do with your public capacity. We tend to see this a lot with regards to politicians, celebrities. We see this in people who live and who are in the public domain. And it's not unusual to find that we often disappointed in people who it has come to our attention that certain things that were done in a private capacity did not mirror what you've come to know about the person in a public capacity. Whenever there is a separation between your private and your public life, and when they do not mirror each other, we say that there is a lack of synergy, a lack of congruency to the person. Whenever we meet people who have a congruency between who they are in their private capacity and who they represent themselves to be in their public capacity, we say that those people have integrity. This brings me to the conversation that I started, yes, in the previous session. Apologies for the noise, as you can, and I hope you would understand. You probably can't see the. I wish I could show you this. There's a plane flying right past me, and it's that close. It isn't that far off. Literally, it's that close, and it's an arrival plane, so it's about to descend, and so it's already started to decline and reduce its height. So apologies for the noise, and take it as it comes. I thought perhaps I'll just share a few words nonetheless, despite the inconvenience and not being in a quiet place. In the session I started previously, I made reference to character, and as a man, and as men, character matters. Let me reconnect a few dots, because I think this is important. I started with the position which was that your philosophy of life, the principles by which you have chosen to construct by explicit or implicit choice, chosen to construct your life, reinforce each other. So your philosophy is guided by your principles, and your principles reaffirm your philosophy, and vice versa. So we start with philosophy first, because that's the foundation upon which you build everything else. Your philosophy therefore determines and instructs you into what you believe in. Therefore, you have a belief system. If you hold a philosophy or a certain way of thinking, or of viewing the world, or understanding reality to be true, then you believe, you associate a certain level of, you might say, a reduced level of skepticism towards that philosophy, and therefore you, by default, associate a certain amount of understanding and reliance on that idea, and therefore it becomes part of your beliefs. Your beliefs will inform and guide you into developing what we call a hierarchy of things that you consider important. We call these values. One thing is more important than the other, and the other more important than the next, and so you have a value system. And when we hear people talk about values, what I value, they are simply saying, on a hierarchy of needs, certain things are more important than others. Those values, by virtue of their importance, will affirm and guide you into how you start to act, which forms your ethics. Your ethics will guide you into a mode of operating. We call those paradigms, we call those culture, we call those habits, we call those routines, and that is manifested in what we call your lifestyle. So we go back. Philosophy, principles lead to your belief system, which leads to, and I missed one important part, and I should have known better, but apologies. Philosophy, principles leads to your belief system. Your belief system inform you based on, say, a code of conduct that determines whether something is right or wrong. We call that morality, good or bad. Morality then informs by virtue of what you consider to be true beliefs and what you consider to be right and wrong. Morality informs your values. Your values, therefore, on a hierarchical basis, inform your ethics. Your ethics is manifested, is shown, demonstrated through your behavior, which people see in your lifestyle. The lifestyle, therefore, is the end. That lifestyle is what people see in a private capacity or in a public capacity. So when people meet you, what people are saying is they're trying to take your words, your utterances, what you say, your deeds, your actions, and your promises, things you talk about in the future that you say to people, you can take this to the bank. And people are looking to see whether there is a consistency between what you say, what you do, and who you are. When there is a discrepancy between your public and your private capacity, there is a general consensus that the person is phony, the person is not congruent, the person is a chameleon, the person is perhaps not true to their self. Everything I described, philosophy, principles, leading into your belief system, leading into morality, leading into values, leading into ethics, leading into behavior and lifestyle, altogether construct what we call your character. Your character is an amalgamation, therefore, of all of those parts that I have just described. And when we have consistency amongst all of those, we say the person is a person of character. Now recognize, when we talk about character, the misnomer we make is we tend to associate character with right and wrong. The same way we misassociate morality and construe morality in one way. We see a person who doesn't have the same religious beliefs as we do, or the same philosophical values as we do, and we automatically say, that's immoral, that is wrong. Well, not necessarily so. The person's philosophy and principles might be different from yours, but the person can still be a person of character by virtue of the integrity they possess and show by being consistent in what they say, what they do, how they live, what they promise, and who they are developing into becoming. And I'm going to say something that is slightly controversial, and men need to understand this. If we look through the books of antiquities and we look through historical writings, one of the things we tend to observe is there are people who we do not agree with on a moral basis. And morality is about right and wrong. One person's good is another person's evil, just in the same way as one person's income is another person's expense, one person's spending is another person's revenue. Morality is subjective. Amongst a group of people or a nation, morality can become objective. But if you go to the Middle East, there are certain things that they see in the West that they disagree with on the basis that it doesn't align with their philosophy and principles. To them, it's heretic. To us, it is to be praised because we focus on the individual and the individual having rights. Therefore, what you find is what is moral to someone who is in Great Britain could be very different to someone who is somewhere in Africa, in the Middle East, in Oriental Asia, or somewhere in Asia. The point being that we do not judge at first glance on morality without understanding the person's underlying philosophy. This is a long-winded explanation, but there's a purpose for that. If at the core, how you behave publicly and how you behave privately are the two yardsticks that we measure you against, then what people are looking to see is consistency. That you can say both are one. I deviate now, and here I'm going to introduce a philosophy that is perhaps not familiar with most people, not accepted by most people, not even considered to be historically true by some people. When you read the books, the Torah, the books of Moses, or when you read the Quran, or when you read the Holy Bible, for some people they might say you read the Pentateuch, what we see are people who lived. But there is a reference that is consistent amongst all these four books that I've referred to, historical books. Now, whether you consider those to be fictional or not, that is besides the point. The most important part of each of those is a statement. And in the statement it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And in many ways, that forms the foundation to all of the testaments and all of the commandments that follow. The Lord is one. In other words, there is integrity in the name. There is integrity in the word. There is integrity in the person. Heaven and earth will pass away. Not one word of mine will fall to the ground. My word will not return to me void, but it will accomplish that to which it is sent. The Lord is sovereign until the Lord speaks. And at the moment the Lord speaks, the Lord is now bound by his word, because his word and him are the same. A king cannot give a proclamation or make a proclamation or declaration and rescind from that proclamation. Many years ago I deviate now, I heard of a king who, in rage, in anger, stated that anybody who broke a particular part of the dictates and the laws of the land should be stoned with a certain quantity of stones. And that was the law. It just so happened that his son, without knowledge of the law, broke that law. And so it was brought to the king's attention what was said. And the people who were the scribes said to the king and his wise council, they said, "You are the king. What would you like to do? But, king, if only we could speak." And the king said, "Speak." According to the scribes and the scrolls, your words say the person who commits that should be stoned with a fixed quantity of stones. And so far, we have executed or we have stoned X number of people. Therefore, king, your word is one, and is one with yourself. So, unfortunately, despite it being your son, you cannot go against your word, because your word is law. And except you were looking for a way to change the law, those words must be applied without prejudice, as it has been applied since the word became spoken or was made law. And the king was bound by his words. He realized that there's absolutely nothing that he could do. He couldn't go against his word, because to do so would lose face, would mean he would lose face amongst his people. So he called his wise counsel and said, "Well, prepare my son to be stoned, because that is the word, that is the law, that is my word." To his wise counsel he said, "What can I do? I do not want to lose my son." And they said, "Well, when you spoke, you said the person who goes against this law should be stoned with this amount of stones." And normally back in the day, these stones were huge, in bricks, and they would stand in a market square, and people would pick up these stones and they would stone the person until all the stones had been exhausted. Most people died. Almost all died because they couldn't withstand all that stoning. One of the wise counselors said, "Well, king, what you can do is you can take those large bricks and you can break them into small particles, so they're like pebbles. It will be the same quantity of stones overall, but smaller quantities, which means you can still have your word become flesh, and your son will survive. He will be injured, but he will be stoned with the same fixed quantity of stone by kilograms, or by stones. No pun intended. And so this was carried out. His son survived. But the point of this long story and boring story was to simply say, the king had integrity. He didn't change his words by virtue of a circumstance that he didn't like. Now, this is where I begin today's teachings. As young men, and as men generally, one of the challenges we face is staying true to our word and having integrity in our character. One of the things that we have to start with is decide who we will believe. What philosophy do we support or surround ourselves with, or we choose as a foundation stone? Character shows up in honor. Honor being recognizing and choosing to escalate or allow someone's words to be raised up to a place where it's revered. There's a level of reverence. When we start off young, we're not wise. We hope we don't go far astray before we have to start repairing what we've done. Someone once said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write. But the illiterate of the 20th and the 21st century will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So, as young men, one of the things we hope is that as we journey through life, we embrace the opportunity to learn, unlearn, and relearn. However, the importance of philosophy is significant because if you imagine yourself being in a race and you start at the line and you're just about to start, you have, in this particular instance, equality of opportunity, but not equality of outcome. You're starting on the same line as other people. Choosing a wrong philosophy sets you so way back. It will be the same as starting roughly 300 yards behind the start line. It means you have to work just as hard as those running, but you have to work harder to compensate for the fact that you've started behind the start line. That is what it means to start with the wrong philosophy. A wrong philosophy, like a guiding system, can set you away from your true north and take you on a path that leads you astray. Eventually, hopefully, as you mature and you go through life from male to boyhood to manhood to being a gentleman, hopefully you wake up. You see, some other person may have been responsible for who you are up until where you become 18 years, but you are therefore responsible for the life you lead from 18 years onward because you are functionally an adult. Someone may have installed the program in you. It's your responsibility to uninstall, reinstall the right software and learn. And here is the big but. Most of us will spend a lifetime trying to unlearn the wrong things that we learned. But for the younger ones, and this is where the message is targeted, if you can install a software, a philosophy, a principle, and you hold on to that principle as part of your beliefs, and you allow yourself to have a value system from which you derive your morality, right and wrong, and you live your life in a way based on your ethics that are consistent with the philosophy, and your paradigms and your culture and your behaviors, your mannerism, your routines are affirmed in your lifestyle to be consistent with that philosophy, then what you have is integrity, and you are therefore a person of character. The most important part is step one, the right philosophy. Now, any one of us and any teacher can sit down and say, how do you know your philosophy is the right philosophy? Now, where I am right now, I wish I could show you a panoramic view, and you can see a panoramic view of an entire city. And in this central place that I am, what you see is east, west, north, and south. And from any point 400, 500 miles away, if people agreed that where I am here is where they want to get to, depending on where they are and where they set out from, they can get to the same location. And they could all get to this location, but they will use different routes. The truth is like the center of town. There are several ways to get there. Some longer, some shorter, some more pleasurable, some just takes longer time. The mechanism of getting there, whether it be a car, walking, cycling, motorbike, scooter, skateboarding, there's several mechanisms to get you to the center of town, but that is the center of town. You will come your way, but here is the good thing. Truth is beauty. Beauty is truth. That is all you need and all you ever need to know. So, you find your way to the center of town. But before you start, ask for directions. This is the key thing. And that asking for direction means philosophy. And one of the best ways to start is to say, can I look back in time? You know, that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of life. There are two ways of learning. You can learn from pain, or you can learn from other people's experiences, mentors, and mistakes. Some people will walk down from where they are and spend 2-3 days and just simply say, well, I'll find it after all. What is meant to be will be. And therefore they learn from their pain, and they find themselves going around and around in the same circle, believing that they are making progress, not realizing that they are mistaking movement for progress, and they are mistaking activity for productivity. It's not about being efficient, it's about being effective. Other people will simply ask for directions. And someone would say, well, take the next left, stay on that left until you get to the first traffic light, go past the first traffic light, continue for about 2 miles. When you get to that place, stop and ask someone else, because I can't give you much more. And that's giving you philosophy and a map, roadmap to get you closer to the truth. In the same way, we always look back to the past to ask, how did cavemen, how did people of old, how did the wise people that we collectively know, for example, let me give you a good example, and this is irrespective of your philosophy in life. Lao Tzu, who is the author of the philosophy we call, captured in the book we call the Tao Te Ching, is one who is respected. Lao Tzu, for those who are not aware, even predates who we call the Christ. His philosophy was known and has been documented, and I have read the philosophy. If you pick up the Quran, and if you study the works of Muhammad, and you read his philosophy, you find out that his philosophy has some very profound knowledge. If you pick up the Torah, and you read the books of Moses, and you read some of the writings, and you read the stories like parables or allegories or metaphors or just stories, you find out that there's a philosophy in there. If you pick up the gospel and you read the gospel, you find that there are words of encouragement and wisdom and knowledge and stories in there. In Hinduism, if you pick up the books, any great religion that has stood the test of time, any great philosophy that has stood the test of time, any great writing that has been used as the basis for other writings has something that is true in it. It's leading you to the center of town. In many ways, you find out that the more layers you have under for which other people use that philosophy to develop a new system, indicates that there is some element of the truth in that original philosophy. A lot of the books we read these days are inspired by the works of the great Muhammad, and his as a humble servant. Other books are inspired by the works of, who knows, let's say Paul the Apostle. Some others are inspired by the Tao Te Ching. Some are just inspired by people whose lives we've respected and admired, like Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and a few others. But the point being that there is an element of the truth. And what you do is you start with that, and it brings you closer to the center of town. And as you come closer, you reappraise, and you keep 3 things with you. Like from 3. You learn, unlearn, and relearn. But you keep 6 honest, wise people next to you. Who, what, when, how, where, and wherever the 6th one is. Escapes me right now. As a young man, you have to start with choosing a philosophy, because it will undergird and it will support you for most of your life. Many young men, myself included, we make mistakes because no one really gave us the philosophy, or we rejected the philosophy by choosing not to honor the voice of wisdom around us at an early age. And so we go through life and we suffer. I'm going to say a few things. All of human suffering stems from ignorance. Now, we are all ignorant, but I think most of human suffering is not just a product of human ignorance, but is by virtue of being resentful and rejecting those who know and the knowledge when it comes. So, your personal and your private life can be one and the same if you understand the concept of integrity and being a person of character. Will you fail? Absolutely. I wish I could sit down and perhaps that might be a session I do sometime. Just talk about my failures. Failures in competency, failure in character, failure in work ethic, failure in achievement, failure as a person. I have failed all through life. But I have always had, I would say, the grace, much of which I did not deserve, and something leading me back to the center of town and reminding me that I'm better than what I perceive myself to be, and I should strive for more. I should be encouraged to do more, and maybe I might have more. So let me bring today's session to its rightful close by saying as follows. You were made unlike any other form of life as a man. When we look at animals, or the rest of the animal kingdom, they tend to operate by virtue of their genetic predisposition and code. They feel at home despite the environment not being safe, but a horse knows what to do at the moment when it's conceived. The gazelle knows what to do, the lion knows what to do, because it operates based on this instinct it has, based on its genetic predisposition. Human beings, on the other hand, you and I, we are co-creators in this life by virtue of the fact that we are created in the image and the likeness of infinite intelligence. That means we can create the life we want. We can choose. At any point in time in your life, you can stop and say, I do not want to live like this any longer. I want a different life. And you can start creating. And by virtue of the fact that we have been given an imagination, we can choose the life we want, and we can do better. Bear with me for a second. I have to go now. Duty calls. I hope you've enjoyed this.